the members of the convention, this majority that I told you about, has understood that their work was not to improve the current constitution, but to completely refound the country.
Dear friends, welcome to another edition of Forum 2000 Online Chats. My name is Jessica Ludwig, and I am Director for Freedom and Democracy at the George W. Bush Institute in Dallas, Texas. Today, we are speaking with Marcel Oppliger, a Chilean writer, author, and journalist who has served as an editor at 3 of Chile's premier newspapers, La Tercera, La Segunda, and currently Diario Financiero. Marcel, it's a pleasure to speak with you today.
It's a pleasure to speak with you too, Jessica, and thank you for having me here.
Of course. In September, Chile, which is generally recognized as one of the most stable democracies in Latin America, will vote on whether to adopt a new constitution that has been drafted over the past year by a National Constitutional Assembly of Citizens. Marcel, can you tell us what has been happening in Chile over the past few years that has prompted Chileans to pursue this major undertaking of drafting a new constitution?
Well, Jessica, this started in a very unexpected way. As you probably know, in October 2019, because of a very small hike in the public transportation price, there was a social outburst, which started a wave of social unrest and violence in the streets, which promptly became a political crisis for the government at the time. The violence got out of hand. In parallel with the violence, there were also a few peaceful protests with a couple of slogans, but it wasn't really clear what the protests were about. It was mostly the riots in the streets that prompted the government and some radical groups to look for a political solution out of that. And in the midst of that, in the midst of the violence, some groups, mostly related to the left of center parties, started pushing the idea that the way out was a change in the constitution. Even though the few messages in the also few peaceful protests had nothing to do with the constitution, but that idea caught on. And there was a political agreement in November of that year to have a referendum on changing the constitution under the message that the current constitution is the Pinochet constitution, which was enacted in 1980. That is not true at all, because that constitution has been amended several times in the last, already 30, 40 years, actually. And in 2005, President Lagos, who is a socialist, enacted the last few reforms in that constitution and declared it a formally democratic constitution for a democratic country. So the idea that we have today, the constitution that we inherited from the dictatorship, it is not true at all. However, the message caught on, as I said, and so the country agreed to have a referendum to reform the constitution. That referendum was held in mid-2020, and it won by an overwhelming majority. And when I say overwhelming, I mean it. It was basically 80% to 20% in favor, or 78 to 22 to be exact, to reform the constitution. As a result of that referendum, there was a subsequent election to select a convention, a constitutional convention of 155 members, and that got the ball rolling. They started working a year ago into drafting the new constitution, and they just finished the past week. And in September, we are going to have what is called here the plebiscito de salida, which is the referendum to approve the constitutional draft that the convention has agreed on. And we have to vote yes or no to that draft. So if we accept it or if we reject it. It's not very clear what's going to happen if we reject it. There is no clear plan for that. And if we approve it, if the majority approves it, there have been so many changes. I'm sure you're going to ask me about that. That actually implementing the new constitution is going to take a few years. Some people are talking 10 years. I think that's a fair summary of what has been going on in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So you've just described for us what the constitutional reform process has entailed, and how that the delegates were directly elected by the population. Can you also tell us a bit, maybe a little bit more about who some of these delegates are, because this seems like an incredibly complicated undertaking, and also to what degree has civil society in Chile been involved in helping inform the public about the Constitutional Assembly's activities, or even supporting the Assembly's drafting process itself?
Okay, as you say, understanding who is in the convention, or who was at this point, because they finished their work, is crucial to understand what went on during the year that they were working. As I mentioned, this idea of electing a conventional assembly was a constitutional assembly or convention was the result of a political crisis and of social unrest, a very violent social unrest. And that was done in the midst of a very deep disenchantment with political parties, which most people, if I might say myself included, felt had let down the citizens, not only in this process, but in the last few years. We have had a couple of, perhaps more than a couple, ineffective governments in the last decade, who have been unable or unwilling to make some changes in particularly in public services such as education, health, and something that is deeply felt here, which is the pension reform. And so the people elected a constitution which anybody could be a candidate, okay, for the constitution, for the convention. Political actors, even sitting congressmen who had to, of course, leave their seats if they were elected. But any citizen could be elected. And the majority of the elected members of the convention in the end were private citizens, okay? The political parties were, to all practical effect, left out, okay? That was, it was really a very strong signal, and that the people didn't want, the citizens didn't want the political parties involved in the drafting of the constitution. Okay, they were left out, as I say. So we elected 155 members who were mostly citizens, with a few exceptions, had a prior constitutional expertise or even legal expertise, but most of them did not. They were just private citizens with legitimate grievances, probably, most of them. But who had no previous experience, not only in legal matters, but in participating in a complex democratic process, such as drafting a document as a constitution, and the debate that it entails, the complex discussions that have to take place, where when you are deciding on the law of the land, and the ideological profile of the convention, if you will, was clearly left of center. Not only independent citizens, but a few of them, or quite a few of them, representing, frankly, radical groups, very close to the Communist Party, some of them, close to other organizations with a populist agenda. And so that ideological makeup, if you will, permeated the whole discussion. So that's who that's the convention that actually set up on the task of drafting the constitution. It was
very, very ideologically marked on the left, to the left.
But to what degree has civil society been able to help support this process and help engage the public, as well as support and perhaps provide resources for members of the Constitutional Assembly?
Well, in regards to informing about the process, I would say quite a lot. The media have been following the process closely the past year. We have been able to see the convention at work, the discussion of the debates in the different commissions, the debates and also the non-debates. As I say, because of this ideological makeup and this lack of expertise in democratic process, some commissions just, they understood that the majority in effect had a free hand to impose their will. So minority members in most commissions were left out. They were not heard. And those members tended to be right of center. So those opinions were not incorporated in the process. And but all of that was informed. So we knew what was happening. The citizenry knew what was happening through the media, through the work of the members themselves, who were very vocal, quite a number of them in reporting about their work to the media and through the social media also. So it was a very, I would say, a pretty well, it was a transparent process. It was open to the public. We could see what was going on, what was being discussed, and how it was being discussed. As to an influence in the process itself, there was, I would say, close to none. If I may give you an example, there was a mechanism called Iniciativas Populares, which was a way for the citizenry, once the convention started working, to gather signatures to make the Constitution discuss certain issues. For example, pension reform, or health or security issues like that. And those initiatives, those popular initiatives, were simply ignored by the constitutional members. They were not taken into account, and they decided that their agenda was the one that had to be discussed and printed in the draft. And so civil society just expressed their voice, but that voice was roundly ignored. I could say that.
So you described how initially there was overwhelming support. It sounded like 80% to 20%.
Yes.
For the constitutional reform process itself. But it also, from some of the public opinion polls that have, at least that internationally we've seen reported, seem to suggest that there's more mixed opinions about the actual language of the Constitution itself. Just reflecting on this a little bit, it seems like on the one hand, Chile's constitutional reform process opened up this great space for public debate around a number of issues where Chilean citizens feel that democracy has perhaps underperformed or maybe should have been providing something different. But on the other hand, it seems like the constitutional process has also revealed some very tense divisions within Chilean society writ large that are likely to persist whether or not Chileans vote to adopt the draft constitution in September. Looking ahead, I'm really curious if you see a path forward politically that could bridge these divides. And maybe if we were just blue skying this, what would such an agenda for policymakers and political leaders look like that could do or accomplish such a more constructive agenda? Sure.
Before talking about that agenda, I would like to say this. There has been, in fact, a remarkable shift of opinion regarding the work of the Constitution. That 80 to 20 majority in favor of reforming the Constitution has now turned, in the most recent polls, to a 60-40 in favor of rejecting the draft. Okay, there is now a majority of people, of course, the referendum is about a couple of more months away, so things could change. But now a clear majority of the citizens are rejecting the draft because they feel not only this ideological process or makeup that I've described, which has radicalized the debate, but that the members of the convention, this majority that I told you about, has understood that their work was not to improve the current constitution, but to completely refound the country. Okay, so they have upended the whole institutional basis of the country. They have reformed the political system, the institutional system, the territorial distribution. They propose to eliminate the Senate, for example. They have created a new chamber, which is a regional chamber whose powers are not very clear. They have created different justice system for the indigenous people. That is a very strong trend inside the convention to give the indigenous peoples not just recognition, but a separate institutional framework. Okay, so the draft is a very radicalized version of the refounding of the country. If I may quote a couple of experts, constitutional experts, who have been in the media recently, one of them said, this constitutional draft sends us back to the 17th century. To the 17th century, it's going backwards in time. It's not a modern constitution. And another one compared it to the Bolivian constitution, which was, as you know, implemented and approved under Evo Morales, whom we know his political agenda. And the Chilean draft is practically a copy of that constitution, of the Bolivian constitution. So, well, it tells you a lot of this radicalization process. You know, I don't want to qualify the Bolivian constitution, whether it is good or bad, but it's a constitution for Bolivia and for Bolivians. The Chilean constitution should take into account the Chilean reality, Chilean history, and the Chilean political situation. It does not. It pretends, it purports to be a refounding of the country and its institutional framework. As to, you ask me what should be the political agenda in the future after the referendum.
Yeah, one that would help.
It's really hard to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, if the draft is approved, if this radical constitution is approved, it's going to take a lot of work to put it into effect. And it's going to take a long time. And it's going to be, I'm sure, a very complex and conflicting process. There's going to be probably again, a reenacting of social unrest and possibly political violence, and if it is rejected, even more so, because there is, as of this moment, there is no clear plan, or there is no trajectory set out for what will happen if we reject this draft. I mean, are we going to call a new convention? Are we going to stick to the one we have now, which clearly the majority of the people do not want? I mean, the will, the desire to change the current constitution remains. I want to make that clear. Most of the people would like to change, would like to see the constitution reformed and improved. They are just rejecting the draft that the convention has proposed, has put forward, because they think it's a radical text that does a lot of damage because of the reasons I've said, and because the grievances that the Chilean people have now are, if you look at them, are not constitution related. They have to do with public health, with public education, with reforming the pension system. Those are not constitutional matters. Those are matters that are discussed in the law and addressed through public policy. And what the draft does is to give those matters a constitutional framework. And the solution it proposes is to make the state to make the state the guarantor of that, and basically it expands the state, really, well, widely. Okay, it eliminates basically private education. It eliminates also private health. So all of those things that Chileans are unhappy about now, which are responsibility of the state, public education, public health. This draft wants the state to solve them. So now we're going to have more public education and more public health in a state that doesn't have the resources to address those issues. So I don't see how this is going to solve any problem at all. What I fear and what apparently a majority of my countrymen feel is that it's going to worsen those problems.
So just maybe perhaps another way to put what I've heard you say is that there are some very real challenges that Chilean democracy is facing, but perhaps an alternative venue for trying to address some of these would be through the policymaking process rather than such a profound and complex processes, perhaps putting all of these into constitutional reform.
Absolutely. The political process and Congress. Chile is a developing country, is an underdeveloped country, is a poor country, and it has the problems that every poor country has, which are not addressed through having the state solve everything, clearly.
Yeah. Well, Marcel, thank you again for taking the time to speak with me today.
I thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry to have painted such a bleak picture, but I'm afraid that's the state of the matter now.
Well, I would also like to thank our friends at Forum 2000 for inviting both of us to join today's conversation. Please tune into
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, thank you. Please tune into Forum 2000's YouTube channel to find more online chats with leading thinkers and democracy activists from around the world.